What's up guys, I'm Jamie, and in this video I'm going to show you how to build an $8,000 duck sculpture from rusty old horseshoes and old farrier files. Now, a client's commissioned me to make this over a year ago, so I better get my ass into gear. So this is my last commission, indefinitely. I'll tell you why, but we need to start from the beginning. How did I even become an artist? I never studied art. In fact, I'd never even thought about art, until one day I saw a horseshoe sphere on a client's lawn. It was just a simple round ball made from horseshoes, but I found it so captivating, so I decided to make one. I went home, rang every farrier in the phone book, and collected up enough rusty old horseshoes to make a ball, which I gave to my mum for her birthday. Then a few of her friends started placing orders. After selling a few horseshoe spheres, I decided to try and make something original, something that no one else had made. I got to work in our small car garage, building a life-size charging ball before and after work. I sold that sculpture as soon as I'd finished it, for $20K, to the same client who had the horseshoe sphere on his lawn. I couldn't quite believe it. Here I was, going paycheck to paycheck, struggling with my mortgage, then all of a sudden I had $20K. The fact that someone paid me to do something that I wanted to do was life-changing. It flipped the switch in my brain, and I decided to go all in. I created a company and spent the money on workshop tools. I had no trouble spending every cent. I had no money before anyway, so what did it matter? But now, I had the opportunity to make even better sculptures. I soon found out that selling your first sculpture for $20K is unheard of. It's like 1 in a million. So here I was, young and naive, no idea how to run a company, with no money to keep it afloat. I had no idea about art either. The only thing I knew at this point was that I could make a sculpture, and that it in fact was possible to sell it. I had to contract back to my old boss to pay the mortgage, and I'd build sculptures in my spare time. It was a vicious cycle, trying to sell art for a living. I'm probably not that much different to you at this point. I want you to put yourself in my shoes, and picture this. You wake up in the morning. What are you going to do, or what are you going to try and make to pay the bills? How are you going to try and sell that work? So I'd get a small sale every now and then, usually like a horseshoe ball or something. That would buy me enough time to try and make and sell another sculpture. I looked into selling through galleries, but most of them take about a 40% commission. I couldn't really afford to give up 40%, so one day I had a bright idea. There's a Hilton hotel just down the road in Karaka, South Auckland. New Zealand Bloodstock built the hotel to accommodate international buyers. They have billionaires fly in and buy horses from their racehorse auctions. So one day I drove to the hotel with a horseshoe sphere on the back of my truck to see if they would be interested. The sphere was made completely from racehorse shoes, and it turns out they were interested. They told me to come back in 3 days for a meeting with the architect, so we could decide where it would be placed. The architect showed me some of the art and sculpture they already had in the building, and proceeded to tell me stories behind each piece. When he asked me what the story was behind my piece, I said, "It's just a horseshoe ball." We decided to place the sculpture in the main entrance foyer. The shiny aluminium ball looked amazing, and I couldn't believe I had a sculpture in the Hilton Hotel. Before I left, the architect said they would lease the sculpture per week, and he'd get back to me in 2 days with a price. 2 weeks went by. Nothing. 4 weeks went by. Still nothing. I rang him, and he said he'd get back to me that day. 2 more weeks went by. Still nothing. I thought, bugger it, so I drove down, backed my truck up to the entrance, walked in, grabbed my sphere, threw it on the back of my truck, and left. And that was the last I heard from them. I don't know, maybe they thought I was just lucky enough to have a piece in their hotel. Maybe I was lucky. But I wasn't going to be treated like that. We're going to take a little intermission here for my story so I can explain to you guys what I'm doing. So once this sculpture's welded and ground smooth, you'll only be able to see these nail grooves. So we're trying to build this in a way that these nail grooves create quite a cool pattern when we're finished. That first year proceeded to be a real struggle. Selling art was 10 times harder than I expected. Plus, no one is going to commission you to make something if they don't know what you can make, right? Heck, I didn't even know what I could make. So that's what I had to do. I had to figure out what I was capable of making and show the world. If I wanted to sell art, I would just have to make bigger and better sculptures. So I put my best foot forward and spent the next 3 months building a life-size horse from horseshoes. The sculpture itself was brilliant. I was so proud of it. But for the life of me, I just could not sell it. I tried everything. I emailed every horse stud in the area. I called every horse-related business who might be interested. Nothing. Okay, a little more on the duck sculpture. So we've got all of our horseshoes tacked on, and we're ready to weld it up, and then we'll take it outside and give it a grind. And then you'll really be able to see the pattern that we've put into the nail grooves. Nothing worked. I just couldn't sell my art, so I decided to make a small rearing horse sculpture for charity to try and gain some traction. It was auctioned off at a fancy Thoroughbred Breeders' Awards night where I had a bunch of other sculptures on display, including the life-size horse. I thought to myself, this is it. This is my big opportunity. I was getting my work in front of the perfect audience. These are the people who breed racehorses. Some of them are worth hundreds of millions. Nothing. Not a single sale or commission. I was devastated. If those guys in that room didn't want my work, then who would? I was down and out and ready to quit. Maybe the dream wasn't meant to be. So this is what our duck looks like all welded up. We're going to take it outside and give it the 1-2 with the grinder. The day after the awards night, with my tail between my legs, I drove down to the venue to pick up my sculptures. On the way home, I called into a pub. Now, a lot of things can happen when you walk into a pub, but this will blow your mind. I sat down with the owner for a chat, then I showed her a stag sculpture I had on the back of my truck. She thought it was brilliant. The pub is called the 5 Stags, so she wanted 5 stag sculptures. But there was a catch. She also wanted the landscaping done to match the sculptures. Landscaping wasn't my dream job at the time, but I needed the money, so I called a friend of mine and we got to work redoing the front of the pub. Righto team, so we are back from our grind up and it's looking pretty good, but there's just a few more areas that need a little bit more welding and grinding, so we're going to go ahead and mark those out and deal to those. She then commissioned me to make 150k worth of sculptures, 5 stag heads and a Corten steel cowboy holding a cigarette and drinking a beer. Once again, I couldn't quite believe it. That was the universe throwing me another lifeline. Going from the lowest low to the highest high is a feeling that words can't even explain. That money bought me enough time to sink my teeth into the next big project. I spent 6 months building a sculpture of a woman holding an 80-pound rock in her chest, called Rock in a Hard Place. Dedicated to my sister who was going through a tough relationship at the time. So I'm ready to start making the wings for this duck, and I'm going to be making them out of old farrier files, but these are super hard and brittle. So in order to work with them, we have to anneal them, or soften them, which basically means we have to heat them up till they're glowing red and then cool them down slowly. Rock in a Hard Place went on to win New Zealand's largest sculpture exhibition. I then donated it to charity. It auctioned off for 85k, all proceeds going to the Rural Support Trust to help farmers in tough situations. Not long after that, my social media started blowing up. Millions of views led to an abundance of international orders. I spent the next 3 years building commissions. The dream was alive. I was making money from doing something that I love, until it all started falling apart. Commissions are great, until they aren't. Okay, so our heat treating process is complete. I'm going to show you how easy these are to bend now. Building commission after commission for 3 years drove me into a hole. I hated it. I couldn't stand the side of my workshop, but I had to force myself to build them so I could pay the mortgage. The money was okay, but the hole was getting deeper and deeper. The passion was gone. So I spent a year in idle, never really challenging myself, building just enough commissions to keep the bank happy. Most artists will experience this feeling, and I think that's why a lot of artists throw the towel in and quit. I had to figure out a way to reignite the passion. I needed something to get excited about. So I decided I needed a bigger workshop, so I could build bigger and better sculptures. So that's what I did. With help from a few friends, we built a big shed on our property. And I say our property because I went halves in a small lifestyle block with one of my best mates. Highly recommend doing that, by the way. So that's the workshop that you see me working in now. I've completely cut commissions, and honestly, it feels like a massive weight off my shoulders. I knew that's what I needed to do a long time ago, but taking that leap was difficult because it was my primary source of income. Sometimes you just got to jump in the deep end and figure out how to swim. I'm slowly starting to make money from Facebook and YouTube. It's not quite enough to pay the mortgage, but it's close. I've taken a massive pay cut, but I'm happier than ever. The dream is more alive than it's ever been. So that is pretty much how I become an artist. And if I had to start again from scratch, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll run through some stats on the duck at the end. So we're ready to make the feathers for our duck, and we're going to be splitting about 40 of these rasps in half with a plasma cutter. You can do it with an angle grinder, but it's just a little bit faster with a plasma cutter. For those that don't know, a farrier file or rasp is a tool that farriers use to shoe horses. They use it to file the bottom of the hoof to get it nice and flat before they put the shoe on. So we're pretty much ready to give this a final polish up and then add some colour to the head, but I forgot the most important part, is little bum tufts. Let's go build them. So we're ready to put some colour through the beak and the head, and we're going to use MAP gas. I've got an LPG kit, but LPG puts out too much moisture and it'll actually start rusting, so I find the MAP gas is just a little bit better for that. It's definitely an inside sculpture, although I did receive some photos from a client who had bolted his one onto the front of his old Hilux for the duck shooting season. The duck is 99% complete, and the last thing I need to do is seal it off with a gloss clear coat. This stops the sculpture rusting and helps protect that nice blue colour on the head and feathers. Let's look at the stats. It took me 110 hours to build, roughly 2.5 weeks. I sell these ducks for 8,000 USD, and it cost me a few $100 in materials, grinding discs, welding gas and wire, and a few boxes of beers for the farriers who were kind enough to give me their old horseshoes. Making this video took me longer than it did to build the duck, but it's my first long form video, so I should get faster as I go. You'll notice I sometimes call you guys team. If you're watching this video, you're officially part of my team. Just by watching this, you're helping me pay the bills, so thank you very much. I hope you liked the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, team.